Yeah.
A good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 168. I believe Rupert August is going to be joining us in a bit. AI is already with me, and I'm not sure who else we're going to get. I never do know. It's always who turns up, basically. How are you going, AI?
I'm good. How are you, Andrew?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Did you have a first subject you wanted to talk about this evening?
Um, I mean, yeah, I've actually got something which, I mean, it's not newsworthy. Well, it's not major newsworthy. It's kind of nice, and we all enjoy like films, any forms of media on like historical topics, right? And we especially enjoy ones which are accurate, show, historical accuracy, authenticity to like the time period it's set in, and a lot of those sorts of films, movies, TV shows, even video games, whatever, um, don't don't have that, and it ruins the whole. It just ruins the whole whole concept of the film. I mean, the worst offenders are usually the Viking TV shows. 'Cause those are usually the worst. But also you have like race swapping historical figures in other forms. And the reason I was going to talk about uh been announced and for people who are into gaming, there's a sequel to Kingdom Come Deliverance, and I don't know if you've heard of this, Iron Duke, or you've seen it about it back in the day, but it was a
I've
create
seen it on YouTube. Yeah, I have seen it on YouTube. Yeah.
yeah, it was created as a Kickstarter back in like 2015, I want to say. And because I remember I donated to it because it was kind of this, it was just this Czech guy with like what was it, like a handful of other people in this small office, and they were putting together a historical, authentic, accurate game set in the area that they live in the Czech Republic back in 1403, I think. And it
Mm-hmm.
it, it follows this fictional character called Henry who goes on like a revenge mission after his village is burnt down by Sigismund of Hungary. Um, and it follows a story about him wanting to get his father's sword back and everything, and it's really compelling story, and the world is incredible because it was created on one-to-one scale of these two baronies, um, um, which
I do remember people liking it at
yeah.
the time, AI, and people saying it was fairly historically accurate, and there weren't lots of
Oh yeah.
random Africans wandering around in it or anything like
No.
that. Yeah, I do remember that for
Yeah.
sure.
And it drew a lot of controversy by the game, like a lot of not just gaming journalists, but regular journalists, because they wouldn't, they all the NPC and all the characters were either German, Hungarian, or like Slavic, like a Czech or a Slovakian. So that, and which correlates with the historical time period of that particular point. And also, it doesn't. They did at the time. They didn't represent. They demonstrated. Because of course everyone was Roman Catholic at that point. Um, and it demonstrates. When they present religion and how the Catholic faith impacted on day-to-day society. They didn't mock it. They didn't present it in some sort of corruptible way. Even when they had there was like an extension to the game where you come in contact with an inquisition in one of the local towns, and you have the inquisitor, and they sort of they actually demonstrate how accurate. Yes, that's correct, Alabaster. How accurate the Inquisition, because most Inquisitions never resulted in burnings. It was usually like public apology or some sort of agreement. It was like the rare exception you would actually have burnings. Like we sort of envision with like
Sure.
Joan of Arc
Sure.
or in Spain. It was very rare. It was very rare. And yes, it was mainly targeted at I mean Spain, it was mainly targeted against Muslims and Jewish populations as a way of changing a balance of power in the region. And as Mitch said, that in the
Hmm.
game you have these Hungarian, part of the Hungarian force are these Cumans who are um, Turkic people from, I guess, modern day southern eastern Ukraine. And during the Mongol conquests in uh, what was it, the 13th century, the Cumans, there was a Cuman like exodus, and a lot of them, and then they started turning up and were allowed to settle in the Hungarian kingdom under the condition, like with the Normans, that they become vassals to the Hungarian crown and convert to Roman Catholicism, and that's what they did.
Hmm.
There was that complete and so by this setting of the game, they, even though they are referred to as heathens, they are, I mean, but they are quite violent. And of course this is all based on real events too. So set, I just brought my notes here actually on it. So you have the Skalitz where the protagonist and the events start. It was a mining settlement. It was one of the wealthiest. Um, it was a mines owned by the king. It was one of the wealthiest in the region because it was a silver mine, large silver mine. And the reason why the Hungarian king Sigismund, Wenceslas's brother, who's the king of, targeted it was because it was to seize the Bohemian crown's gold, sorry, not gold, silver revenue. Um, and so that's where the game starts. And anyway, the point is, Iron Duke, is that to sort of continue this.
Hmm.
A sequel of the game has been announced. It looks incredible. The same people are working on it, and he's just demonstrated in a presentation the architecture, the culture, and one thing that was really nice is they had this. I guess one of the developers who was there said, she said one of the misconceptions of medieval world is that it's all dark and dirty, and the fact is your peasants weren't dirty, they would regularly clean. That's a very modern
Yep.
myth. That there was color. I mean, there was the armor, the clothing was very colorful. Battlefields would be incredibly colorful, many different banners, standards,
For sure.
symbols,
For sure.
everything.
Yep.
And the buildings were incredibly detailed. They weren't like in your provincial villages, sure, like in Kingdom Come, it's all wooden. A lot of it's wooden buildings, maybe the odd stone building, like with your church and everything. But yeah, it was largely wooden. But in cities, well, 'cause in the sequel, this is set in
Hmm.
the city of Kutna, but it referred to in the game as Kuttenberg, being the German translation. Um, and in that it shows the excellent Gothic architecture that we would know from German style buildings, given the German influence over Bohemia at the time. And um, this game fundamentally is building up to what would be, as Mitch is sort of referencing in chat, is the Hussite wars with Jan Hus, who was of course a Czech um, figure at the time. He was a proto, I guess you would say he was a proto reformist along the lines of Luther, and he was burnt at the stake. He was burnt in
These were
1415.
the dudes. Sorry, these were the dudes who fought from wagons and so on, weren't they? The
That's correct.
Hussites.
That Yeah, they, because they were outnumbered
Didn't they
by, because
use they use like wagon lagers to defend against the knights and stuff like that? Yeah.
Yeah, because this is the thing is like during the Hussite Wars, not the whole of Bohemia, or Moravia, which is Slovakia, was on the side of the Hussites. I mean, you had large portions of the country, but you had like this coalition of German, Poles at some point, Hungarians, and also um Catholic Bohemian loyalists and everything in conflict. So yeah, there was this was a way of um, that was a way of for them to even out the playing fields on battle, and the Hussites won under Jan Žižka, who Mitch I think mentioned earlier, who was their leader. I think if you go to
Hmm.
Prague, his statue, his main statue, he's the chap with the eye patch, I believe, and he is the
Okay.
Hussite general. Um, there was a film about him recently, which was absolutely terrible. It was such a shame because it had Sir Michael Caine, who was brilliant in that role, but the adaptation was terrible. It was generic, like brown and dark, and they
Is
had like black
AI? Is
people
this the
walking
one?
about.
Is this the film? AI? Is this the film people are talking about in the chat called Medieval or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that?
it's terrible. It's a
I see
terrible
that
film.
Mitch and Garrett or Riviera are talking about it. Oh, they're saying it's
Yeah,
no good. You're saying it's no good. Okay, I haven't seen it, so I don't know. But okay, if you say so, I'll take your word for it.
it was a shame because the game developers really distanced themselves from it because the game came out, then the film was announced, and the people for the film says they were inspired, and the game developer says, "Oh, cool, we can get involved in this." And as soon as it came out, the Warhorse Studios, it's called, who run this, distanced themselves from this, and the reason is by the looks of it,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
by the looks of it, they didn't, follow the advice of making it an authentic and accurate thing. Because, and this is where the key to it is, if you're telling a story about a particular time and place in film or video game, if you do it on the idea of it being accurate and authentic, it makes the story far more interesting because you can actually see and understand the world that you're trying to create. And the audience will understand it.
Mm-hmm.
The people viewing it will understand it. And so the reason I'm talking about this tonight is, there's not much media out there, and any content out there which is, which demonstrates historical setting through and openly this game, this sequel, it's about the character Henry developing his chivalric values, knightly values as a squire, and I have full confidence that this is going to be um like the first game. There's going to be no like sort of modernity. Like, I'm actually surprised of how lack of modernity is in it. I mean, of course, most content has a bit of modernity in it, but even like the token woman in there, she's incredibly feminine. She isn't like a girl boss, but she is incredibly feminine, and um, she doesn't. There isn't any subversive, gender bending roles or anything out of sorts like that. So, as I say, anything I come across which is good and promotes traditional values, I will support wholeheartedly. And the funny thing is that that game that came out in 2018 was the last proper video game I played. Um, because I played it during lockdown. You see, when we were when we were all shut in, that was the one thing I was able to do. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, as I said, it's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I do remember when it came out. I've never played it, but I did watch it being played on YouTube a few times, and a lot of people seemed to like it because it was pretty authentic, and there wasn't any fake diversity in there and what have you. So yeah, fair enough. And all
No,
I hear about in terms of video games these days is people saying that they're ruining them more and more. So it'd be good if a decent game does come out.
yeah, and
The other
another.
game the other game I've heard about that people are saying is pretty good is something called Manor Lord, which apparently is looks like it might be quite good as well. But again, that's just what I've heard. I'm not a big video game person myself.
Yeah, that's a sequel to Warband and stuff. Yeah, that's quite good. I mean, I think that's like a free for all. There's not like a story to it. You can lead armies across maps, and I might be wrong. There might be a story to it, but I don't really know Iron Duke, to be honest. I haven't got that
All I've
far away.
heard, AI, is that all I've heard is it's like a city building game, but there's also armies and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I mean that sort of stuff has always been entertaining. I've like Crusader Kings, that sort of stuff. It's always but even now, like the old Total War stuff, you can't even touch, because the people, the original people who made like Rome and medieval have all gone, and now you got like this new generation of developers who are um crap, and every
Yep.
time they do anything,
Yep.
it's just crap. I mean the funniest update that happened recently that I remember a few years ago with Rome Total War is they added like female Roman generals.
Yeah, yeah. I used to play Total War. I don't these days, but I used to, and the ones I liked were Napoleon and Rome too, and
Yeah.
yeah, female generals, for God's sake, in the ancient world, which were about as rare as hen's teeth. But
Well, yeah, exactly.
But I don't know. Anyone who follows me on Twitter will have noticed that for the last week I've been having a bit of a argument with assorted feminists and simps about women in the military, which
I do
have
about
not
you, Iron
succeeded
Duke.
in changing my view on them. But there we go.
Iron Duke, I see videos on Facebook every now and then of like female drilling sergeants. I think there's many in the United States. Thinking about it, um, um, oh, Vingle, just a quick one. That Rome 2. That update happened in Rome 2, not the original Rome Total War. It happened in Rome 2. But yeah,
Yeah,
to
it was
continue.
Rome too. Yes, it was.
Yeah. In in on Facebook, I keep on seeing like these. I presume like Army US training centers, training recruitment centers, and you have like these like midget female drill instructors running up and shouting and basically trying to do like a their own little like Full Metal Jacket routine. And it just, I don't know how. I mean, if I was in that position, like if I was like a recruit, I'd just laugh my head off, because you can't take that seriously.
Yeah,
You
so would
can't
I.
take that shit
Yeah,
seriously at
so would
all.
I. I would absolutely. Some silly little 5'6" woman screaming at me, I'd just laugh at her. I really would.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, it's like this 5 foot like Latina bellowing at these white lads who've like come from freaking Alabama and where they get like the bulk of their fighting force, from those sorts of states. And it's kind of, you know and I remember when it showed the face of like these guys, they like looked at each, there was like a quick look at each other, thinking, oh my god, we've made a mistake coming here, haven't we?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like if you watch, for example, what's the name of that film? Full Metal Jacket. Yeah, Full Metal Jacket, which is about the U.S. Marine Corps in Vietnam, and the dude who plays the gunnery sergeant in it, the training instructor, he really was a gunnery sergeant before he became an actor. So but he's
Yeah.
like 6'2" and reasonably tough looking dude. He isn't a 5'6" little chicky babe,
I think at the time,
And of course, I had
it,
well, the biggest the biggest tweet I ever did on X was a little film clip of these two girls in the British Army who literally could not get over a 5 foot high wall. They couldn't get over it at all.
I mean,
which kind
the
of makes
thing
them
is,
pretty useless in terms of the military, really. But
but the thing is, you know, at this stage, I'm at the view that we might just need a war just to like kickstart everyone's minds out of this. I do think a great deal of this sort of idea that this is all acceptable comes from number one, the fact that we haven't been in, like, the West hasn't been in any serious conflict for a long time, and also two, the continuous like girl boss power films and cultural media, that the idea that, you know, like this, like the 5 foot midget can take out like 15 guys at once, you know, like in some Hollywood film. And the reality is, and in the real, as you said, you know, in a real battle situation, those women would end up probably getting either killed or captured really easily, and depending on your enemy, may even get abused horrifically.
yes, absolutely possible.
So,
They could also get
so
guys killed because guys will try and do stuff to save women that they won't do for blokes. So, and of course,
yes,
if you're wounded, and your oppo is a 5'6" girl and you're a 200-pound man, how on earth is she going to pull you into cover or to the rear? She's not going to be able to do that, is she? She's not going to be strong enough. You know,
and especially not
and
with
you'll
all
get
the
these silly
equipment.
fools who will turn around and say, this is what I was just going to say, AI, is that you'll get these idiots who've never had anything to do with the military, of course, who will turn around and say, oh, well, you don't need all that much strength to pull a trigger or something like of that nature, you know. The thing is, you do need a lot of strength to be able to carry 80 pounds of equipment all day over very rough terrain. And an infantry soldier has to be able to do that. And if he can't do that, he cannot do his job.
My
You know,
local town, Eindhoven, has a home of an army barracks, and there's this famous depiction in the barracks, but also it's been like painted, and you see it, like copies of it in a few local pubs. And um, during the recent Afghan conflict, there was an incident where that particular regiment came toe to toe with the Taliban, and they actually did a bit of hand-to-hand combat because the Taliban rushed them. They were caught in I guess like a, not like a ditch, but like a, I guess like a ravine, or however you, something along those lines, and they end up having a very brief hand-to-hand combat. It was mainly bayonets, but there was one particular trooper who just pulled out his knife, and you know, there was this hand-to-hand combat. Now, so when everyone says, oh, it strength and required to pull a trigger, well, you're not always going to be firing on the battlefield. You may actually come to the point where you have to use hand-to-hand combat to kill somebody.
well, there's a reason the British Army would never accept a rifle that won't take a bayonet. And, you know, and all right, a lot of it is for morale purposes because a guy charging at you with cold steel is fairly scary. But how many women are going to be up to being faced with that? Not many, I suspect, to be honest. But as I say, leaving all that stuff aside, in order to be an effective infantry soldier, you have got to be able to spend at least 8 hours carrying up to 80 pounds of equipment over the roughest possible terrain, including up very steep hillsides, across desert sands, rivers, you name it. And most women just can't do that. They're not strong enough to do that. And that leaves aside all the other stuff, which men have a huge advantage on most women, in terms of aggression and that kind of stuff, which most women are just not very good at. They're not. This is why, you know, the feminists always want this both ways. They want the situation where any man, be he the little tiniest wimp in the entire world, if he even slams a door on a woman, he should be able to be thrown out of his own house, because that is violence against women, supposedly. But on the other hand, women are perfectly all right, being shot in the face or bayoneted in the stomach. They're all right for that, supposedly. It's just nonsense, and it doesn't work. And all I got when I was having this discussion, I just finished quickly, AR. All I got when I was having this discussion on Twitter, on X, was feminists, and also quite a lot of simps, it has to be said, turning around and saying to me, "Oh, well, I was obviously a moronic squaddy who was never promoted," which actually I never said I wasn't, and I was. I was promoted at least 4 times, but all right, it's like it's just craziness. It's silly nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, you've also got that that whole thing in the US about, if you ever come across if you're a man, you ever come across stopped by a female police officer, make sure you're wearing, a bulletproof vest, because if they, because the thing is, there have been so many occasions where if one of them felt threatened or even mistakenly used a taser instead of sorry, it's meant to use a taser, but instead accidentally used their pistol, because they felt threatened. So it's not just the army.
I saw the girl who did that. She meant to pull out her taser and in fact pulled out her pistol and killed the dude. She was 100%. I saw
that. The funniest
no panic there, of course. There was no panic.
The funniest one was there was a female police officer. She in the again, this is the US, and she arrested this drunk woman, and she parked her squad car on railway tracks. She went to put the woman in the back of the car, went off to another squad car parked further up, and they heard this train coming, and the train took out the squad car with that drunk woman inside. Again, another win for the gender equality.
Craziness. Rupert, how are you going? Always nice to see you on Splendid Isolation. How are you going today?
Hello, doing well. Thanks for having me on again.
Did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up this evening, Rupert?
I do, but I don't actually have that much information on it because I'm struggling to find it now. I was just trying to do a quick bit of Googling because I can't remember how long ago it was now. I think a couple of weeks ago I saw some stuff about New Zealand and their current political trajectory being quite positive. So undoing a lot of the damage that the Ardern government had done. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't find much more information on that. So unless either of you have any more information on that, then I guess we'd have to park that.
The only thing I can say is that with the recent stabbings in Sydney, there's been a lot of push in Australia, both from the New South Wales Police and from the Australian Labor government, to bring in even more draconian censorship on social media. Of course, they won't let any crisis go to waste. And constantly what we get is, Australia's this successful, diverse country. And you know what? Australia is no more successful than any other country that's diverse. And the more diverse it gets, the less successful it gets. And the less the people get on together, because that's just the way we human beings are. But of course, you're not allowed to say that.
Yeah, I was quite surprised to see how many Assyrians there actually are in. Was it in Sydney? Or which one was in Sydney? The attack on the priest, on the Orthodox priest.
There's quite a big Middle Eastern population in Australian cities. A lot of them are Lebanese, and I know there's a chap in the chat who had something to do with them when he was in Australia some years ago. Yeah, there are lots of Syrians, and these days, of course, there's a huge number of Chinese, and there's also a lot of people from the subcontinent as well these days.
No, not Syrians, Assyrians, as in the Assyrian Empire.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Which is which is even more surprising.
We were talking before you joined. We were talking before you joined, Rupert, a bit about that church dude who was stabbed, and he was a pretty good guy. Like during the lockdowns and so on, he was very anti-vax. He was a pretty base bloke as far as I can work out. I believe AI agrees with that. AI used to watch him before he even realised he was in Australia. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because there's 61,000 Assyrians apparently in Australia. Many of them came from obviously Iraq and Syria. More recent arrivals came from Syria due to the civil war there. I mean, isn't it funny that American foreign policy? I mean, these people, the biggest enemy of the Assyrian people has basically been American foreign policy for the last few decades.
I mean, yeah, it's a sort of through line of American foreign policy at this point that whatever America does, Middle Eastern Christians are going to suffer because they're the one group that will never get any attention from the specifically the American foreign policy establishment. France used to be quite good on this, but yeah, obviously since France has disappeared, then not so much anymore.
I tell you what, the Assyrians, they could survive, Romans, the Alexander, the first Islamic caliphates, the Seljuks, the Ottomans, the Crusaders, the Mongols. They can't survive American foreign policy though. They can't survive the lesbian empire.
Yeah, it is strange that I mean, obviously, well, it's not strange. It's for obvious reasons. The Israel lobby is so powerful in America. That in the way that Mearsheimer and others have pointed out that it's the Christians who are continually ignored in the Middle East, and also you have to some degree blame some of the idiot evangelist types in America who are like, they seem to be more pro-Israel than they are pro Middle Eastern Christians, which is strange.
Yeah, I
mean,
it's the worst aspects of Protestantism, who quite frankly should be burnt at the stake. And I absolutely fucking hate these people. They have done more to promote a group which has absolute contempt for Christians, and they've managed to convince all the other sort of dipshit boomer politicians, especially in the Republican Party, to support them over the fellow genuine Christians of the Middle East. I mean, it's just really insufferable, these evangelical people. And also they are absolutely demented. They are insane. They go balls deep in heresy. It's just incredibly levels of madness.
Yeah.
I can't fathom.
Yep, for sure. I was watching an academic agent stream earlier in the week, and he actually had one of these insane, like pro-Israel religious Christian types on there, and the guy just sounded insane. He really did. He sounded insane. He said, "Oh, if you meet a Jewish person, go and hug them," and all this sort of stuff. And it was just utter nonsense.
Well, yeah, because they have this. And correct me, people, my fellow guests, but there's almost like a doomsday cult to a lot of these evangelicals. It's all part of like the whole reawakening Christian movements. That the idea if the Jews are returned to their homeland, then you have the second coming of Christ, and that's basically why you have all these evangelicals literally worshipping the floor of many Jewish and Zionist in America and in Israel.
It can't be just that, though. I don't know the full story, but it seems like there must be something more substantial going on. One thing I did find that I wondered about, I suppose, as some kind of strain, but I've not really had the chance to follow up on it properly, is if British Israelism was something that sort of took over. And so, if you're not familiar with what that is, the idea that Britain was actually the real Israel, and that the British people are the real Israelites. So, changing over the whole chosen one line of thinking, but it kind of comes with an implicit positive view of the Old Testament and the position of the chosen people. So, if you've kind of already broken, if you've already broken the back of that issue, then even if part of it is debunked, then you might not be able to get rid of the whole implications of that line of thinking.
I mean, I guess you could argue. Well, no, there is no real argument to it. I was thinking of like the whole Glastonbury Abbey, the connection with Joseph Arimathea. I don't know. You can't really connect any of that to. Yeah, but yes, it's. I mean, I think what the back. I think a big part of it, if is probably a generational thing in response to what happened in the Second World War. I think a lot of it is guilt. I mean, let's be honest, most of it on the European level is guilt. But the funny thing is with the British aspect of this is with the historical British governments is actually the British governments have been largely pro-Arab through its, especially the Foreign Office has been explicitly pro-Arab. It really wasn't until Thatcher afterwards that you had the more aligning with America, with Israel. But even to this day, the Foreign Office is quite pro-Arab. I mean, I'd say Cameron, to somewhat of a degree, has sort of signalled counter-signalled against Israel. But I don't think because he's pro-Arab so much. I think it's because he wants to get the focus back on Ukraine. Because, of course, there's the split in the Tory party at the moment. The real split is that you got some who want more British taxpayers' money to go to Ukraine, and then you got some that want it to go to Israel. So that's the real split in the Tory party. Where our money goes.
I just think if we're going to spend more money on AI, if we're going to spend more money on the military in Britain, then it really needs to go to the British Armed Forces, which have never been smaller and weaker in their long history. They have never been smaller and weaker than they are today, and that is particularly true of the Royal Navy. And of course, Britain remains an island trading nation that has to import food. It's like, doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't. I don't care who runs Ukraine. It's not a vital interest of the British. Britain will get on just fine if Russia even takes over all of Ukraine. Same would go for whoever wins in the Israel war against the Palestinians, which I'm entirely neutral on. I don't care who wins that war. Or the Israel war with Iran. Again, don't care. We should just stay out of it. Why is it that the British government can get the RAF to intercept weapons aimed at Israel, but we can't stop rubber dinghies coming across the channel every day?
Oh, and it couldn't even get a call back over it either.
Priorities right. I'm sorry.
Did you catch that? Did you catch that? That Rishi Sunak tried to get a conversation with Netanyahu, and couldn't even get him on the line. Which is thanks we get for intercepting missiles for them.
That's what you get for sending the RAF to save people. They won't even talk to you.
What's been really funny in this saga is how
it's insanity.
What's been really funny in this saga is how many Indians, especially like Hindu nationalists, are supporting Israel in all of this, and to the point where there was one I saw, I think last week, one of them, he went to Israel and tried to go into like several bars, and he was turned away, basically saying, "Oh, there's not enough room," and he's like, "Oh, I can see space at the bar." No, that's already booked up. So I just imagine Rishi Sunak turning up in Tel Aviv and trying to go to like a hotel or something, and they're like, "No, sorry, it's all booked up."
that's one occasion I might even have a certain sympathy for Israel, to be honest. But whatever. Aubrey is asking in the chat, do you think Russia will stop with Ukraine or go on to reabsorb, I presume she means all former USSR land? I don't think Russia even wants all of Ukraine. I think she wants the Russian bits of Ukraine. And I don't think there's any chance whatsoever that Russia will attack anyone else apart from Ukraine.
Well, here's the funny thing I would say
on the panel think, but that's my view.
The longer the war goes on, and the more it drains Western coffers, and the more that the West and Europe especially is hurt by the war and trying to supply Ukraine, the more likely it is that Russia is going to try something else elsewhere, because their alliances have been strengthened, which is going to cover their rear. But also, there's going to hit a point where the US even, and the rest of NATO especially, are just not really going to be able to do anything about it if they decide to move into the Baltics or something. Because with what ammunition are they supposed to come and save them?
I think America is in grave danger of being very overstretched at the moment, because they've got Ukraine, they've got the stuff going on in the Middle East with Israel, and there's an increasing likelihood that there could be a quite serious war between America and Iran. And if that happens, Israel and Iran, and if that happens, they're almost certainly going to drag the Americans into that, and probably also the British, of course. And then, of course, still hanging over everything is what is really the most serious threat to the Americans, which is the situation with the Chinese in the South China Sea. America is in danger of real bad overstretch at the moment. And most of these wars won't do the Americans any good whatsoever. I mean, they're going to gain nothing out of anything that's going to happen in the Middle East. And they're not going to gain anything in Ukraine, because I think it's pretty clear now that Ukraine has no chance whatsoever of winning this war. None.
I mean,
I don't know, but Mitch, you. Sorry, wait, 1 second. Mitch, you study this like quite a lot, particularly as you speak Russian. I just don't see there's even the slightest chance of Ukraine being able to win this war anymore. Any slight chance they might have had a year ago of winning some sort of reasonable peace settlement is now long gone, because Putin will just turn around and say, no, we're just going to take what we can take now, because they will be able to.
Well, the thing was, in that offensive they did in Kharkov Oblast back in September 22, they went about it wrong. You said they went for the border, but they could have gone southeast, could have screwed over Russians in the Donbass even more before the mobilization took place, and not allow the Battle of Bakhmut to soak up all their resources. But that's exactly what happened. In a way, like Bakhmut kind of ended as a turning point of the war, because up to that point, it looked like the Ukrainians were on a steady path of chucking them out, and then the Ukrainians just allowed themselves to be predictable. They allowed themselves to be guided more by propaganda than actual military victories on a strategic basis. So that's why Ukraine's not going to win this war, because they played a stack of cards and they screwed it all up on behalf of propaganda.
Yeah, I totally agree. AI, what's your view on this?
I was going to just say, one of the things that it's been revealed in that Adam Curtis documentaries, when you look at the especially the more recent one, where you look at what the post-war and post-Soviet Union consensus was from America and the West and America's allies, is that there was this vision to keep that if we create all these integrated multinational public-private partnerships in states, it will make war obsolete. That there will be no more conflict, because of course the system that we live in, managerial system, is based on poropaganda and soft power. It's not based on like hard power of like physical violence or force. It's based on propaganda and indoctrination and maybe even arguably some aspects of psychological warfare in some cases. And I think one of the problems that you've got is that there's been like this unnatural push to prevent conflict when really war and conflict is a natural state of man. And like in the Curtis documentary, when the first confrontation of this during the Yugoslav conflict, many of British and American and people and UN types couldn't believe that in current year, I mean they literally said in current year that this sort of sort of ethnic based violence could even occur. And so I mean I don't even know if there would be any sort of will to even to join the war, because I don't know how. I don't even know how they would be able even to spin it, because they would have to, the regime would have to go from being a soft power to sort of hard managerial power, and I don't think they've got the numbers or the will or the persuasive techniques to even attempt that on the population in the UK or America.
My own view is that I agree with the American Professor Mearsheimer, who points out that nationalism is still the most powerful force in the world. It just is. And that's never changed, and it's almost never going to change as far as I can work out, despite all this diversity is your strength nonsense that they try and feed us in the Western nations. Overall in the world, nationalism is the most powerful force of all. Always has been, always will be.
Well, it's more based on reality, because it's about what's in front of you, of your community and your people and its history. It's real. It can be seen. It's not some abstract idea that that convinces you of your lying eyes, like all the transgender stuff, for just an example, or any other aspect, or liberalism or egalitarianism. It's none of those things. Which doesn't even animate people, because this is the thing, it has to animate people. I imagine the Hungarian, I mean, see what ones like Viktor Orban, for example, but I imagine the Hungarian people are quite animated in the sense that he's been re-elected, but he's made it so he can't be removed. In the last elections there.
Well, it's not just in the elections. It's also he's turned the constitution into a fortified conservative stronghold, pretty much. So even if he were to lose a majority, like he would, the problem is they would have to have a 2/3 majority to reverse everything he's done, which is never going to happen because we've all got beaten. We've all got less IQ, than a fucking bread loaf. And as I said, like, the only way that Orban and all these lot are going to be turfed out is if either you have some sort of like invasion or some sort of like communist revolution akin to 1917. But what are the chances of ours happening? Pretty small. But that's the thing, like
doesn't
Hungary,
seem likely, does it?
Well, I mean, even if, let's say, an armed intervention was likely, I mean, even then, I mean, let's say, for argument's sake, Russia were to have a border with Hungary. Okay, Hungary's now got more geopolitical options, so now they can toss off any idea of another 1956 happening from the West this time, from ever happening to them. So,
yeah, it seems unlikely to me, Mitch. I got to say, I don't see Western nations deciding, oh no, we're going to invade Hungary. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think Orban is much more right than wrong. Put it that way. I wish Britain had somebody like Orban, or Australia, same thing.
I mean, I think one thing.
Somebody asked me earlier, by the way, in the chat, if I lived in Australia, and I do live in Australia, guys, but I'm a POM. I'm an Englishman. Okay, I'm not an Australian. I've lived in Australia for 24 years, but that does not make me an Australian. I'm an Englishman. basically. Sorry, carry on, AI.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like the birthday boy today. Remembering his birthday. When
Oh
he
yeah,
attempted,
I forgot about that.
yeah, when he attempted his when he went through his early political career in the Weimar Republic, is you still had like quite traditionalist and conservative institutions, including parts of the army, judges, the courts, the police, and what have you, in places. But so for him, I won't say it's easier, but for him it was, you had there were some friends and allies. In our case, because the way the system works, I think even if you had a Viktor Orban figure, you just have the whole system would come crashing down on top of them, because there is no like sort of judge or anyone on our side that's outspoken or visibly presents themselves that way.
So far,
Orban would be.
so far,
I mean, the thing about the idea of a colour revolution in Hungary is it's never going to happen because, as I said, like the system's too rigged for Orban and his lot that they'll never actually be overthrown. And on the off chance there was something, it would have to be a serious dereliction on Orban's part to have allowed such opposition to gather. Because I mean, as I said, like the opposition, even like the that Mihozank party of in Hungary is like the real nationalist, more nationalist than Orban. Even there, like everyone's just like retarded over there. So there's no chance really of Orban getting removed from power. And as Duke said, like I don't see a possibility of a 1956 happening to the Hungarians from the West. So
no, very, very unlikely. Apart from anything else, the West would seriously struggle to gather that many forces. They would. People just do not realize how scanty the Western European forces are these days. They don't. I'm sorry. People have the wrong idea. They look at raw numbers, and even when you look at those raw numbers, you've got to say, Laura, out of those raw numbers, maybe 30% perhaps of the soldiers are actual fighting troops. Maybe 30%. Certainly ain't any more than that. So if you look at the British Army, which supposedly is 80,000 men, is actually about, I think it's 74,000 at the moment, although it might actually be as low as 72,000. And if the current trends continue, it's going to go down below 70,000 over the next year or two. Only about a third of those people at most are actual fighting troops.
Yeah,
the rest of them are doing rear echelon shit, basically.
Yeah, so the idea that we could invade Hungary, I mean, the thing is, aside from like the shit libs, no one would actually support it because, I mean, you think of Hungary, you think of Budapest with its sort of very European architecture and all this. I mean, I haven't actually been because I plan to go at some point, but it's like, it looks like a very beautiful city. Do you really think that the average Englishman or the average American or the average Canadian, average German or whatever would applaud the idea of invading Hungary? I mean, the country's flat as a pancake, so an invasion wouldn't take long, but still, it's sort of the main cities. But still, I just don't see a realistic scenario where, how could the governments really command any sort of public support? It's like the war in Iraq. I mean, I don't know.
Hey, I mean, look, Simple Pirate in the chat. Simple Pirate in the chat is saying America could invade Hungary and it'd be over in a week. Possibly, if the only person America had to worry about was Hungary, but it's not. And also, do you really think that the French or the British or any of the former East European nations are really going to sit there and see the Americans invade Hungary and think, oh, that's all right,
No, it's not about which country would they set the invasion from, because they can't do it from Austria because they're they're getting on well with Hungary as of like other aspects of peace in Ukraine. Slovakia, well, their government's aligned with Hungary these days. Romania, well, we've got Transylvania to worry about. Half of like they've got a lot of Hungarians within Transylvania who would be up in arms if if Hungary was invaded. So, but Serbia, they're not going to, because why would they consent to American forces deployed in Vojvodina against Hungary?
The Serbs are not big fans of the Americans. No, exactly.
No, yeah, it's like even it's like it's like apparently during the midst of the Kosovo war, we actually asked the Hungarians apparently under Orban to invade Serbia from the north, and I thought that was BS until I found it was actually true that we actually asked them to, but the Hungarians told them no because, among other things, our army just wasn't ready at all.
Yeah.
Never mind the fact that Hungarians have no.
Yeah, it's not. It's just it's not a practical political thing for the Americans to invade Hungary. It's not. It's just nonsense. It's silly to think that they would.
Yeah, and it's like, for example, I don't think we can do anything.
And the Europeans are sure not going to do it because they just don't have the forces.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you take like
Aubrey in the chat is saying that it's always the USA invading Europe or England with you guys. It's not, Aubrey. This is not us. This is just people in the chat. All right, this is not us. We're not saying this will happen. We're saying this is not going to happen. So,
yeah,
simple clarity. Who is an American who is suggesting it?
Well, the thing is, it's not just the Americans. It's also our country. We're complicit as well. You say, Iraq, 2003. We also were there with the Americans. Even the bloody Ukrainians were there as well.
100%.
Even the bloody Poles and Ukrainians were there as well.
Britain is by far. Mitch, Britain is by far America's most loyal poodle, for sure. I agree.
Yeah, because that's the main problem. I was like, we have
who was the country beside America? Who was the country beside America which was helping to shoot down Iranian missiles aimed at Israel? It was Britain. And as I said earlier, Britain can do that, but we can't manage to stop rubber dinghies full of economic migrants coming across the channel every day.
And also in the war footing, we couldn't decide our own. Our generals couldn't decide their own strategy because again, going back to Iraq, it was the American decision to disband the Ba'athist Party, who paid the wages of soldiers, police officers, who ran all the administrative works of the country. And as soon as that, you had hundreds of thousands of angry, armed, unemployed Iraqis forming little groups of militias on the streets. And the war went from being an invasion to
when they got rid of the Ba'athist Party in Iraq, like all government employees pretty much had to be in the Ba'athist Party, so school teachers and anyone who was a local council guy, they were all in the Ba'athist Party. So when the Americans disbanded that, they basically made all those people unemployed, which was a recipe to start a big guerrilla war, which they duly got.
Well, yes, and anybody, again, it was. It's kind of obvious, you have to. You can see where they got the idea because, of course, same thing like with the invasion of Germany and the end of World War II and rooting out the national Nazi elements from the West German, make sure that they couldn't hold positions in any future governments within what would be West Germany or the Allied controlled Germany. So I think that's that there's your inference there of why what happened to the Baathists, but it did. But unlike then, they allowed. I still can't get over that hundreds of thousands of armed, angry Iraqis out of money were allowed to wander off with their guns, and they wandered off with their guns, and I guess the assumption was they would be cool about it.
Yeah, I think in Afghanistan as well, though.
Yeah, it was incompetence basically, but yeah.
I think I don't know if it was Hillary Clinton herself, but there was certainly some some female, some bitchy woman in the halls of power in America who vetoed the idea of the Afghan monarchy ever returning because she said we just don't deal with monarchies. So Afghanistan never had its monarchy back, and so we're all sat at home with our faces of shock when the Afghan National Republic falls within 90 days to the Taliban after we leave. So it's
also look at Libya, which was another Hillary Clinton wonder move, which the British were very happy to help with. And, you got rid of Gaddafi, who was bayoneted up the rear end to death, very, very civilized. And Britain was a big supporter of America in doing that. And now there are open slave markets for Africans these days in Libya. I mean, great. We did wonderful there, don't you think?
It's like with Libya, it's a bit weird because it wasn't just. I mean, it wouldn't be out of easy imagination if it was just us and the Americans, but the Italians were very big on bombing Libya, under that Matteo Renzi or whatever his bloody name is. And
lo and behold, it used to be their colony, Mitch. Don't forget.
Yeah, but
Libya was an Italian colony.
Okay, and what interest would it serve to a Sicilian, for example? Now, let's say the locals living on the island of Lampedusa, which is pretty much swamped in migrants these days. What interest would it be to the average Italian living in, say, Sicily, if Libya becomes just a lawless crap hole, a complete cackhole of disorder? I mean,
it was much better. It was much better. It was much better for Italy under Gaddafi because Gaddafi stopped immigrants.
No, I'm saying why would the Italian elites support bombing Libya? Now you say, oh, it was a former colony, and I go, okay, and so was Somalia, but you don't see Italians being enthusiastic about the Americans back in '93 and being possibly deployed alongside them as part of the UN. Fact, there was actually a story.
I'm totally agreeing with you. I'm saying that the only thing that getting rid of Gaddafi did was to help mass economic migrants come to Europe. That was the only thing he did.
I was saying
slavery in Libya.
No, I was saying, why would the Italian elites support bombing Libya? It's one thing when you get American and British elites doing it, but as I was saying, why would that Matteo Renzi and all these the Italian centre left, probably wherever they were at the time, why would they support bombing Libya? Because it's one thing when even France was also gung ho about getting rid of Gaddafi. It just struck me as a bit weird how the French and the Italians who was as gung ho as us about wiping out Gaddafi. I never once was swamped with Libyan migrants and whatnot, and all the redacted word that has poured in.
Yeah, it never made any sense to me, mate. It never made any sense to me. I don't know why any of us supported it, to be honest.
I mean, I can understand.
I don't know why any European nation supported it.
I mean, I can understand the Scots hating. I can understand the Scots hating Gaddafi just because of that Lockerbie thing, but.
I remember at the time in 2011 the justification or the way that they got the way the government got British people on the side is, as Mitch just mentioned, they used Lockerbie, but also they used the murder of PC Yvonne Fletcher at that Libyan embassy shooting.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And it was basically saying, "Oh, we'll get."
Sorry.
Yeah.
And also the IRA, Gaddafi giving the IRA Semtex explosives and.
I mean that's the moralistic sell, but I suspect what they thought is that if they
which
could
is
replace,
which is true because they were Marxists. Yeah.
but I suspect that they, in practice,
Yeah, I was just going to say
more democratic or like representative government.
They did help the British IRA a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I say, Rupert. I agree. It was just a reason that was like the casus belli for the British public, for why we need to do this.
Yeah, but in practice, they probably thought that if they replaced the government and made it more of a representative type one, then they'd be able to exert more influence. Which is kind of what happened in Tunisia, for example, where they basically handpicked the some of the successors in the successive government.
Well, you see that there was a faction in the Libyan revolution.
Didn't quite work out in Libya though, but yeah.
Yeah, but I was just reminding myself that there was a faction in the Libyan revolution that wanted to restore the Libyan monarchy that Gaddafi ousted, and there was like this in the UK government. I remember there was because this is where I first heard about it. So it was an article talking about getting like a monarchy back in, or constitutional monarchy of sorts back in Libya, but of course that never transpired. But yeah, because the Crown Prince was obviously
instead they got open slave markets instead. They didn't get democracy; they got open slave markets. But okay.
But it is a shame because the Crown Prince of the Crown Prince of Libya, he was sponsoring and funding parts of the revolution like quite a bit, and he was he was there on the ground towards the end of it. So, it's a shame. If he got his ducks in a row, he could have actually taken the helm of power, let's say.
I mean, that would have been,
I don't think so,
quite the long shot, because he would have needed some kind of like Western support, which was
I mean, as we know from Benghazi, the CIA were balls deep.
Wasn't it Mitch who said recently that Hillary Clinton said in the case of Afghanistan, we don't deal with monarchies.
Yeah, and because of the CIA,
pretty unlikely, really.
I mean, let's be honest. If there was like a monarchist revival there, the CIA probably would have, got airstrikes on him or something like that. So,
I mean, Hillary Clinton's one of the worst women there's ever been in the history of the world. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know what to make of the whole. You have a Pahlavi family. You've got turf day by the mothers over in Iran. I've noticed I've noticed an up. Yeah, I really don't know what to make of them, because I mean, it looks like they're getting possibly gay up to replace the Iranian government, or make some noise about it. But as you'd say, the cynic in us tells us, the Pahlavis are just a stooge. Like they'll be.
I just don't see.
They'll never be allowed power.
I just don't see, Mitch, how even if America gets into a big war with Iran, and I hope they don't, because if they do, apart from anything else, the Brits will get dragged into it as sure as shit. But if they do, there is no way short of a massive land invasion they're going to change the government in Iran. And I just don't think the Americans are up for doing a massive land invasion of Iran. I don't. Iran is an enormous country. It's far bigger than
the problem with the Middle East now is, outside of Israel, they've all just turned hostile towards us. Like this is not the same Middle East you had 20 years ago. Now everyone just hates us. Over like Iraq, for example, at this point, they're just an Iranian puppet. Syria, well, they've got Assad, who's not too friendly towards us, given heavy CIA links to bloody ISIS of all things, and al-Nusra and all those lot. Turkey, well, they're just trustworthy as a bloody crab. I don't know. I can't. Egypt, well, I think Maven Politic did a thread on Twitter about how he's saying that the next crisis in the Middle East might actually be Egypt, because their population's too big, and they're not. I mean, becoming like a malfusion petri dish as of late. Saudi Arabia, well, they're not as pro-America as they were 20 years ago. And you got Yemen, which is a basket case. Oman is probably the only country in the Middle East is actually very pro-Western. I mean, Kuwait and the UAE, they're not pro-Western as they were 20 years ago.
Still pretty pro-British too, actually, Oman. Yeah, Oman is still pretty pro-British as well. It's still got British officers who serve in the Omani army and this kind of stuff. You know?
And also,
partly it's pro-British because the British helped the ruler of Oman defeat a communist revolution in the 60s and 70s. So, you know.
Yeah, you've also got like a Judge Knapp, who I know AA's been promoting, and I've been watching sort of a backlog of some of his streams, and there's also a take on there that in Jordan there's like a sort of maybe possibly a looming crisis with the monarchy there, where you have this sort of rising Islamist, anti-American, again anti-Western movement within the country, and that the monarchy, the government there is sort of on a can't be visibly seen to be too pro West like it used to be. And I mean, no one's really said, "Oh, an Islamist revolution in the country," but I mean, in these times, who knows? So it's something I've wondered as well, given at the start of the sort of Palestine protests in the Middle East and stuff, that Jordan would have huge demonstrations, and there was even like a case where a couple of them, a mob went to the border with the West Bank to confront Israeli security forces there. So I do wonder what could go on in Jordan as well.
I think Judge Neapolitano, this guy you're talking about, AI, he's quite interesting because he's an American judge, and most of the guests on his show are former US military dudes or former US intelligence or diplomatic type people. And he gets a couple of ex-British diplomats and people on there as well. And these guys are all universally saying the same as we tend to say, which is that the best thing the US could do is to stay out of the Middle East and actually get rid of the troops they got there now, because they're serving no useful purpose except being targets. I just think it's interesting that, you watch that channel, and as I say, the most of the guests on it are ex-military guys, or they're ex-diplomats, or ex-CIA and this kind of stuff. And they're almost, they're all universal in saying the best thing America could do would be to stay out of it and not get involved in the silly bloody wars which Israel is trying to expand at the moment. Which is certainly my view.
I'm seeing people in chat sort of talk about Egypt, and again, another reminder, after the revolution and the removal of Hosni Mubarak, you had this period where, because the revolution, of course, was made up of, like with the Iranian revolution, you had your Islamist factions, you had your pro-Western Democrat secular factions, you had your communists and Marxists and all like smaller ones, but to various degree. But of course, the most organized one in in Egypt was, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood, who managed to seize power before there was again like a military coup in that sense. And even in Egypt, Egypt could, in theory, go quite Islamist. Because it had done before. I mean, the thing there was in 2012, there was a military coup backed by the West to kick out the Muslim Brotherhood, arrest their leader, and I think it was outright banned. The party there was outright banned.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Yeah, I don't really know too much about Egypt because, I mean, we've probably had more revolutions than bloody the French at this point.
I mean, they kind of remind me of them. They kind of remind me back then. It's like I remember I sort of compared them. I was at school. I did like a PowerPoint or something. I don't know, something. I sort of compared them to like the early Mexican republics. When they'd have a revolution every like 5-6 years or something like that. So.
Yeah. So, as I said, like the problem is, Egypt's population has exploded like the past, like 50 odd years, I believe, and like the lands just can't put up with that. And Cairo, for example, I mean, Cairo is just a bloody monster of a city by itself. So, as I said, like countries, and you gotta think, they import a lot of food, especially from Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah,
but
many people don't realize. Many people don't realize that Cairo has become so huge that like it laps around the pyramids these days.
Apparently,
Yeah.
there's a McDonald's next to the there's a McDonald's like right by one of the Sphinx or something like that, or within sort of viewing point of the Sphinx.
Yep.
I'm told by somebody I knew who went on holiday there.
Yeah, it's like the spot where bloody Mussolini was killed off back in 1945. They put McDonald's literally at the place where he was hung.
I mean, something to bear in mind though when it comes to Egypt is it's in a sort of fragile state, but I mean we can surely all agree that having a massive population surplus is also a pretty huge advantage that not that many countries have nowadays, or at least it's a very big opportunity depending on how it's used. I know it is sort of traditional to look at this kind of thing as an issue that needs to be solved, a la China, but having that kind of massive generation sort of like pushing through and coming of age all at the same time is something that is probably going to be at the very least an opportunity for them to explode onto the world stage if they don't fall into some kind of crisis. So
I was going to say what you're saying is right there, Rupert, but only if Egypt has the resources and industry to build the infrastructure that those people need, which it doesn't seem to be able to do at the moment. But yeah, possibly.
Well, there's a lot of things that it can import, considering it's got quite low, manpower inputs, and that's the basis of low cost manpower inputs, I should say, or human capital inputs, which is the basis for a lot of countries' industrialization. Or potentially it could use that population in other ways in a series of giant wars or whatever. If it wanted to fight with Ethiopia over water rights and I don't know, throw a ton of people at Libya and try and turn them into a proxy by. I think they support Haftar, don't they? General Haftar. Any number of other things they could try and muscle in on. Sudan, that's another traditional one for Egypt. Sudan's got a ton of unused agricultural land, or at least underutilized, you could say, agricultural land, and so it could be a fairly easy sell for them to raise a massive army, just try to invade Sudan and parcel out the land as Roman style. If we're going into a period of extreme international uncertainty where countries aren't so afraid to invade one another anymore, which seems like it's happening, but things could restabilize.
It does. Yes. Well, yeah. I don't know how it's going to restabilize, to be honest with you, Rupert, because there isn't. We've just come off this period after, say, 1990, when for a little while America was the only important power in the world, really, and that's not true anymore. And I see Michael K, 19th Century fan in the chat, is talking about even the US are trying to build this dock to put aid into Gaza, which the Israelis don't really want them to do, of course. And the US are having trouble because the ships haven't been well maintained. And, the US Navy is not in a good condition at the moment. It's not as bad as the Royal Navy, which is down to 16 major surface escorts. And not all of those are active at the moment. In fact, only about 2/3 of them are. So it's nowhere near as bad as the Royal Navy is, sadly. But the American Navy is not in a good condition at the moment. It's like they spent an awful lot of money, time, and effort in producing these littoral combat ships. which they're now scrapping because they're no good. They can't do their job. And they build loads of them, like, scores and scores, and they're useless. And as Steve is saying in the chat, every major US shipbuilding program is way behind schedule. And if you're like, say, Professor Mearsheimer, and you, like I do, and think that the big problem that the US is facing is China. It's not Ukraine and Russia. It's not Israel and Iran. It's China. And what they're going to need for that is a navy. And the American Navy at the moment is not in a good nick. It's just not. But like I say, in Britain, we can't say anything because the Royal Navy is in a far worse position because the conservative, so-called conservative party have completely neglected the British Armed Forces since they came to power 20 years ago. And it's never been smaller and weaker, and that's particularly true of the Royal Navy. And Britain, and above all other nations, depends on a navy rather than the army. So yeah, we're not in a good position for fighting people like the Chinese, for example, in the South China Sea. And if America does end up fighting China in the South China Sea, Australia and Japan will definitely be involved in that, and so will Britain. And it will mostly be a naval and air war. And it's your Navy you're going to depend on. And, the American Navy has a lot of problems at the moment. And so does the Royal Navy. So, yeah.
I'm Duke. I'm going to have to head off now, okay? So thanks for having me on. And
most kind of you for joining us.
Say good night.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's great to be on. And
your YouTube channel is AI Shire Tory, is it not?
Yeah, that's right. AI Shire Tory. And I'll be streaming the next chapter of Richard Hilton with Connor this coming week. So check that out as well. If people enjoying that series.
That's the Strange Death of the British Empire book. It's a good series, guys. Do go and check that out on AI's channel.
Yeah, that's right. Check that out. But yeah, thanks for having me on, and I'll see you all later.
Speak to you later.
Go on, go on. Okay. Mitch, did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up this evening?
There's two, but I don't know, one of them's not really much. It's just, I don't know. Apparently there's a Westerner who got killed this week in Ukraine. Some Texan Marxist fellow by the name of Russell Bentley, who he's been in Donbass since 2014. He's been there since day one. Pretty much, he was married to a Russian woman from that area, and he's generally been sort of what's his name? Patrick somewhere, I can't remember. About a left-wing version of that guy, and just generally covering the war in Donbass and whatnot. Later turns out they reckon he got killed off by a Russian army unit because there was an artillery hit or some sort of air raid, someone's going off and whatnot. He was taking pictures of it, but some Russian soldiers probably heard his Texan accent and probably killed him. Some misunderstanding.
Because they didn't realize he was an ally. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine the soldiers who did that will get reprimanded and will be punished accordingly because, as I said, this guy's been in Donbass since day one. He's been. I don't really know too much about him. All I know is that he's a Marxist type. He's essentially wanting the USSR back, and he sees America's evil because of capitalism, blah blah blah. So make of that what you will, but yeah, he's essentially a pro-Russian. I don't even know if he did journalism work, so he just report.
Mitch, all I saw about him was the stuff that Russians with attitude put on Twitter, on X, and they were quite complimentary about him, and they were certainly hoping that if some of these either Russian or Donbass army units were involved in killing him, that they were hoping that they would get punished for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, on one hand, like the problem with Donetsk is it's still a lawless hellhole because, well, you can't do police duties in a place that's still getting bombed by the Ukrainians. So, there's nothing to stop. I mean, because there have been cases of, let's say, it's like even in the midst of a blitz. I mean, it was very rare. It wasn't as common as some people might think, but you did have cases of looting and whatnot. So I won't be surprised.
Oh, you did, mate. Yeah, yes, you did in the Blitz in Britain. Yes, you did. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, I hear like contradictory things where on one hand they say, "Oh, everyone was very well disciplined." Well, I won't say everyone, but like most people were well disciplined enough to not do that, and generally were disciplined enough to, not panic even when the elevator shelters were full of literally urine all over the place. I mean, people being scared, but then you do get those malingering types who will just loot as soon as everyone's outside their houses. So you can imagine, let's say this, I said, like this guy, this Texan Marxist, he learned Russian like 10 years ago, so you can imagine he had a strong accent akin to like a strong Texan accent. And probably some Russian soldiers misunderstood what he was there for, before he was some sort of spy, killed him off, and now, I mean, the only other thing was, oh yeah.
Well, I've got to say, I'm sorry he got killed, but I'm no great fan of Marxists. But whatever.
Yeah. So the only other thing was, I mean, to be fair, I already mentioned it being the Kingdom Come Deliverance. I mean, the only thing was, oh yeah, some guy did a post about the Christians, but he desecrating the loads of classical era works from ancient Greeks and put like a cross on their faces and whatnot, or got rid of the noses amidst like conversion to Christianity, and generally, the Christians in Moses acting like a sort of proto-ISIS in terms of having defaced a lot of pagan works in Moses.
Yeah, that was quite common, Mitch. That was quite common in the early Christian church. This is one reason why a lot of ancient Roman statues are missing their noses, and you will sometimes find ancient Roman mosaic floors where the center of them have been destroyed. Early Christians used to do vandalism of that kind. Sadly,
they did. Yeah, and you get all these Christians on Twitter like cheering it on. Like I don't think I've seen a single Christian that I know of who's actually vocally just went, okay, this is a bit fucked. No, they've all just been going, oh, this is hecking based, or look at this, our pagans, BTFO, blah blah blah. So this is just ignited.
Yeah, it strikes me as being a bit. That strikes me as being very superficial and foolish, to be honest. But yeah, all right, man. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because it's like that's the thing. I mean, if
like I think the Christians are being very superficial and foolish.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, that's the thing is, so if a Christian is willing to support behavior like that, then they have no argument or no ground to stand on when you have literally Spanish communists who did the same to bleed like the graves of long dead nuns during the Spanish Civil War and whatnot. So like, it's just opening a can of worms on their side that we really should not open. But as I said, this is why I'm more of a pagan. I don't call myself a pagan outright just because I don't know. But as I said, I wouldn't. I mean, because the problem is, like,
I tend to think you're right, mate.
Like the problem with the pagans
I tend to think you're right. I mean,
not centralized communities.
There are pretty respectable pagans in the modern world. I mean, I would suggest people like Survive the Giant, for example. who's a good historian. And he's a pagan, and fine. I got no problem with that personally. I mean, where would Western civilization be without the classical world? Without the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, it wouldn't be anywhere really. And the early Christians, to a large degree, built on that stuff. I mean, yeah, they did some vandalism, sadly, but much of the early Christian philosophy came from the classical world's Greek and Roman stuff. So I just think it would be foolish for modern Christians to turn around and cheer vandalism on. I mean, that's as bad as the Taliban like blowing up ancient stuff in Persia or what have you. It's just craziness.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's stuff like that tilts me over towards the pagan side. I mean, it's like someone saying I'm giving for summer solstice. The problem is, like, this is my main critique about the whole, like, the pagan side of everything is there's no centralized community about things. At least with Christianity, you've got churches, but the thing about paganism, there's no churches. But there's no churches. The closest thing you got is like nature, because the whole point of paganism is, you worship nature, or you'll get a bunch of like-minded community together in, like, let's say somewhere like Cannock Chase or the New Forest or whatever, and they'll.
I mean, that's more like the hippie revival of paganism. That's not what it was all about.
Yeah, I mean.
Also, they did have, like places of worship. It's just that they were pretty much universally either destroyed or converted into churches.
Yeah, so I mean, on one hand, it's like, because you notice that when the Vikings invaded, they didn't build massive temples at Uppsala over here. They just. That's one reason why people think, oh yeah, the pagan side, oh yeah, they get together in like a forest and generally see nature as like the thing to worship as like an element of the gods. So that's why people generally go that way. But like I said, like there are holy sites like Uppsala in Sweden, and where else? I think there was a holy site near Copenhagen, but I can't remember where precisely in the island it was. And some other sites, like, I'm pretty sure England had them as well, because that's why plenty of place names have like Woden or Funor or some other Germanic god mentioned in the name of a place, because you would have had holy places all over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I said, most of them were converted. So for example, in my town, there's at least 2 churches that I know of that were built atop sites of sacred significance, deliberately, obviously.
Yeah, that's kind of stuff that gets vague to be very anti-Christian. Because I mean, on one hand, you can understand where it comes from when he says, "Oh yeah, the Christians literally desecrate a lot of pagan heritage." But then again, I don't know fully about that phase of things, because I mean, perhaps it's a simple fact of, on one hand, a lot of people willfully convert to Christianity, but at the same time, there also was a bit of violence involved.
I mean, yeah, obviously, oftentimes. Well, for one thing, though, the law was used against them, so that's part of the reason why they went for the princes first, because that allowed them to then use the law, such as it was, against anyone who wanted to continue practicing, pagan practices.
I think we could maybe take a leaf out of Alfred the Great's book. And, obviously Alfred the Great was a great Christian king who went on pilgrimages to Rome and this kind of stuff. But he still claimed descent from Woden. So, he obviously, there was still some respect there for the old gods. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's that's how a lot of the early conversions were actually conducted in practice. Kind of not half-hearted, but there was like an attempt to make it compatible with existing thought and existing practices and all that kind of thing. So there is a point that was sort of quite rightly made by Survive the Jive that the kind of like very biblically pure version of Christianity that's incredibly strict towards scripture and stuff like that, that was not how Christianity was originally pitched, and that was not what people originally converted to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I agree with that, Rupert. That makes a lot of good sense, actually. Yeah.
Arguably, you could take that a step further and use that for sort of bolstering the point as to why it was made or it was allowed to be so compatible with a kind of military warrior ethos, because obviously that was quite neatly carried over and just channeled towards Christendom, rather than having to find theological justifications for it in the Bible and such, because they just arguably they just didn't care as much about that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think I would agree with that. Rupert, is there is there anything you would like to shill while we're here?
Nothing in particular, I don't think. Still working on.
Like I know you've got a YouTube channel. I don't know how busy you are these days.
Yeah, still trying to work on my next video for that, but it's slow going.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Any final thoughts, gentlemen, before we shut up shop for the evening? Or no, I've got one announcement to do before we close. But any final thoughts, guys?
No, I don't think so. I think I've aired all my thoughts on everything.
Mitch?
So the only thing I'm hoping for is that, I don't know, but David distributors who was one guy who was arguing against the other pagan side. I'll be agrees to a debate with someone like Dave Martell or some other pagan type online, just to, I don't know, just
the person,
pagan
the person I'd like to, like, I like Dave, and I like Dave, Mitch, and I'm a moderator on his channel, and the person I'd like to see Dave do a stream with is Survive the Jive, actually. I'd like to see him do a stream with Survive the Jive. I think they could have an interesting conversation, and they'd probably agree on much more than they would disagree on, to be honest.
I mean,
that might create a lot of bad blood is the trouble.
Sorry?
That might create a lot of bad blood is the trouble if there is some kind of like significant disagreement. I think Survive the Jive goes pretty much out of his way to try and avoid those kinds of confrontations for.
Yes, he does.
Like
look, yeah, he does. Maybe. Yeah, you're probably right. I just think, there are pagans who I admire. There are Christians who I admire. And I just think we have so many enemies these days. And when I say we, I mean those of us on the right, I guess. We really need more allies and no more enemies. I just don't get this infighting stuff when we don't have any power. We don't. So
yeah, I mean it's
right on Limbo. Can I just say to right on Limbo in the chat who's asking me for the stream link? Right on Limbo, you are most welcome to join us next week. But we've almost finished this evening. So if you want to join next week, I will absolutely. You can join my stream anytime you like, mate. But next week rather than this week, because we've almost finished now. Sorry, carry on, Rupert.
Yeah, I mean, a good point raised by Michael K, 19th century fan or 19th C fan. Yeah, pretty much agree. But I think if you wanted to get very, very rigorous about it, then it is that there's a point that I would make that, and perhaps Dave Distributors has made it as well, but it's kind of the tradition basically died. So you're trying to sort of reconstruct it. You don't have something concrete to joined back up to the present. So you're trying to figure out what it was in the past with incomplete information, often written by the Christians themselves or by converts. So, you know, it's like the direct comparison would be trying to reconstruct the Inca religion from the writing, or the Mayan religion from the writings of Spanish missionaries and such, and priests. You're probably not going to get a very accurate picture of actually what it was, and maybe that's just gone forever. So if you're going to try to restore some kind of like pagan-esque tradition, then you might have to do it from a slightly different source. But obviously that's something that I'm sure someone like Survive the Jive would strongly contend against. So it's
the same with it's the same with the Cornish language, where
I think that's a fair point.
It's not the same with Cornish. You know, technically it died out in 1750, and the only reason it's spoken nowadays is because it's literally English native speakers bringing it back. But problem is, now we've got an English accent while speaking Cornish, so the original way that's Cornish sounded, let's say 500 years ago, is forever lost, unfortunately. And that's the way Scots Gaelic and Irish Gaelic are going to go. I mean, Welsh looks set to sustain itself and survive. I don't know about Breton in France. So, I don't know. I mean, but the French government, they're always anti-regional differences, to say the least. So they'll quash that language on the altar of the whole centralism they've always had since the revolution. So, I don't know. But as for there was that film about the Vendée
since the revolution, Mitch, you're entirely right.
There's that film about the Vendée rebellion. I can't find it anywhere, so I'm probably going to give up.
It's only on. It was aired on like one French channel or something, so it's quite difficult to come across.
I've been trying to find it. I've been trying to find it. Yeah, I can't find it anywhere on the internet, and I've been looking everywhere for that. It looks like it might be a good film, but
first person to see that on a pirate site is probably going to get our eternal thanks.
Yeah, if someone can find it, by all means. Yeah, I've looked everywhere and I can't find it. And the couple of places where they said it was, it's been removed. So, but yeah, the French revolutionaries basically did a genocide in the Vendée. You know, they were killing vast numbers of these Catholic and royalist peasants, and the few people from the aristocracy who supported them. You know, and they didn't stand a chance against these enormous revolutionary armies that were sent there. And they didn't just kill men, you know, they killed women, they killed kids, they killed babies. The French revolutionaries were not nice guys at all.
And Napoleon cunningly evaded a posting there. Otherwise, we'd probably be remembering him, or at least, maybe he wouldn't have even got to his position if that original order had stood, because he was sent there originally. But he didn't want to do the dirty work.
Yep, that is true. I mean, it's like his whiff of grape shot that they talk about, which was actually, you know, firing cannons on civilians. You know, it wasn't a whiff of grape shot; it was firing cannons on civilians. But yeah, not my over a nice guy, Napoleon. But I've never been a big fan of Napoleon. But anyway.
Well, one can't help but think that if
all right, guys, one thing I'd like to announce.
Then, well, there might have been a lot less blood in the period. Little blood saving a lot, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think Louis's problem was he was too nice of a guy. Really, that was, you know, he wasn't some sort of evil autocrat. He was actually quite an easygoing and nice bloke. The last French king, you know, the one the revolutionaries chopped his head off. They also chopped the head off of his wife as well for no very good reason that I can work out. But anyway, yeah, he was too easygoing, if anything. But definitely
assassinated his son as well, I believe.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much they did, yeah. Not good guys as far as I'm concerned, but I would like to tell people I'm going to be doing a special stream on the 25th of April, which is Australian time. So if you're in Europe or America, it's going to be on the 24th. And that's for Anzac Day. Anzac stands for the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. And they first saw action at Gallipoli in World War I in 1915. It's not going to be a history stream as far as I know. Depends on what my guests want to make it into, really. But we're going to have Tim Wilms, who's a pretty well-known Australian YouTuber who has his own weekly podcast, which looks at things in Australia, which I would recommend to people. And we should also have Furious Pertinax, who's also a pretty well-known Australian. May possibly have another guest as well, but we're just going to look at what's going on in Aussie these days. It'll probably be in the evening Australian time, so I don't know. It's not going to be this early in the morning because I want people in Australia to be able to watch it. It'll be like late afternoon or something Australian time. It'll be afternoon British time or what have you. So we will be doing a special stream for that on Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember now, one of the two. So we'll be back for that one. Please go and check out Rupert August's YouTube channel and check out AI Shia Tori's YouTube channel as well. And I'll see you guys in a few days' time. Thank you very much to my guests, to AI and Mitch and Rupert August. And we'll see you next week. Don't let the bastards grind you down, guys. Good evening.
Good night, all.
Good night.